Hello, hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Freedom Games, Igrzysk Wolności, and this year's discussion. This exact panel will be about Belarus, since it has been over 3 months since the historic protest started in the country. And the people have gone a long way. They have learned who they are as a nation. This nation has reinstated itself and united against police brutality, demanding a fair election. This nation has also paid a high price. By now, almost 18,000 people have been detained during the post-election protests. 120 people have been recognized political prisoners. Thousands have been tortured. 8 have been murdered. These are not only numbers. These days, Belarusians are mourning Roman Bondarenko, a 31-year-old man who was badly, severely beaten by unknown men, plainclothes men, and he died after that. It is major escalation. At the same time, the people's reaction that we have been observing is incredible. They are united and defiant, and people have been gathering in dozens of thousands for almost 100 days all over the country. And the major question for them, they have been asking themselves, is what's next? And that's the exact question I'm going to ask my colleagues, my distinguished speakers today. And it's my pleasure to welcome today's panelists. Olga Kovalkova, who is member of the Presidium of the Belarusian Coordination Council. You can wave your hand, I guess, or yeah. Andrzej Poczobut, who is a prominent journalist, columnist at Gazeta Wyborcza, dissident. You can just say hello so people understand. Andrzej. Okay. Stepan Putilo, who is founder of this prominent Telegram channel, Niechta. Stepan, if you could say hello.
Tak, dzień dobry, dzień dobry.
Great. Okay, so we have translation, and that's why we might have a few seconds of delay. So please be patient. I'm going to start with Andrzej Poczobut, who is in Grodno. That's my understanding. Grodno is a city in Western Belarus. He is based there, and he's been reporting on the protests most recently. And Andrzej, I want to ask you, what are you seeing on the streets right now at the moment? If you could give us the latest.
В Гродні протести.
Protests in Grodno are lasting, but their scale is much smaller. There were no such big protests during last days, only a few smaller ones. We had more like drinking a tea in the evening, not the protests themselves on the districts with a strong opposition attitude. And there were dozens of people arrested for drinking a tea. So it shows how the situation looks like. From one side, we have a regime that tries to intimidate and paralyze Grodno, all the actions in Grodno. Because right now, when the date of the protest is released, people start to gather, but then they see police cars, and police officers would stop everyone who could possibly be a participant of a protest actions. So some people are imprisoned even without taking part in the actions because they did not occur. That's why Also, the death of Roman Bondarenko was an event that touched everyone. We have candles lit on the place, on the church that was destroyed in 1963 by communist authorities. We have lots of flowers and candles put there to commemorate Mr. Bondarenko. And not far from my home, some gatherings near the church. So that's the forms of these protests right now. And when we look at the smaller towns, cities, settlements, these protests were stopped at the first time. It was not such common in smaller towns. And the tactics that the regime is applying now is complete not allowing people to gather, but we have that it's a misinformation that people now sympathize Lukashenko, that they are friends again. It's trying to stop people to participate in these actions.
What exactly do you mean? The safest for now, I think, those protests that have been happening in local neighborhoods, they were perhaps the safest ones because, it's not far from the apartment or... Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, people gather, just drink tea, have conversation together, sometimes singing songs. There used to be marches, but right now we don't have any marches. Right now we have a certain group of people formed. They just meet. There are local chats. So inhabitants of one district have their own chat, and on this chat they publish some initiative, and either it works out or not, either they gather or not. People want to gather, then there is a information on the chat, but sometimes they come to the spot and nothing happens there.
So basically what you were saying is that most recently these protests in Grodno have been to a certain extent suppressed, which means, well, because of these mass arrests. At the same time, you are saying that next Sunday, this basically Sunday might bring more rallies, more protests because of the death of Roman Bondarenko, and you mentioned these candles that appeared all over the city, and you also mentioned that basically kind of people are expecting new forms of the protest, like new safer forms, right? Thank you for this. That was really exciting. Let's switch to Volga. Volga, I was wondering, you were traveling all across the country before the election. Let us just come back to that moment before the election and that campaign that you took part in. And I remember I was covering these rallies as a journalist, and I saw how much people are mobilized, how many people came basically to see Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and the female trio and express their discontent with Alexander Lukashenko and his actions. If you could kind of give us a few thoughts about why people got mobilized to this extent in the first place, what happened, and what did you see during this campaign?
Thank you for your question. The change in Belarus happened to a combination of factors. In the first place, there are mistakes of Lukashenko himself. His stupid policies in the beginning of the pandemic, he said there is no virus. He mocked the people who got ill. There was to help to the doctors. Later were the mistakes during the presidential campaign. Then this year we had 3 strong candidates, Viktor Babarika, Valery Tsipkala, and Sergei Tikhanovsky. More than 365,000 people signed for Babarika to become a candidate. It was clear from the beginning that he will be the main rival of Lukashenko at the elections. But the dictator did not want to see any strong rivals, and he put Babarika and Tikhanovsky to prison even before the registration. The people were very angry when the strongest candidates were put to prison and not registered. It was the beginning of the open protest movement. Then the united team, which was formed out the 3 teams to support Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, was a strong step to motivate the people to stand up for the changes. The campaign led to a victory because the people believed in themselves and everyone became a leader. All. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Yes, well, I do remember that actually when it all kind of started, partly obviously because of the pandemic. The pandemic was one of the main triggers, and people just got so disappointed, and they just saw, you know, that the authorities lied to them, and Lukashenko, well, himself personally lost trust of the people. So, so yeah, it was definitely a major trigger, and then new faces arrived, and those, you know, blogger, this banker, that they've become so popular that when they got arrested, people also got so angry they started coming out to the streets. But I think another major factor is actually Telegram and you know, this social media network that has become so popular, and people just trust it so much. Stepan, this will be a question to you. I think you are you kind of expected it, I guess, because, well, you are the co-founder of this major Telegram channel, Nechta, that is one of the factors of this revolution. How do you see your channel in the context of this uprising? Do you think it's another major factor? Do you think it's one of the reasons that people come out to the streets? How do you see it? Why Telegram? Why Telegram revolution? Why are we calling it?
Oczywiście, że Telegram to był takim jednym z...
Telegram was one of latest factors, new factors, that led to escalation of protests, because other social networks, other groups were easily blocked by authorities, and opposition websites that were recently blocked more than 70 pages. Of course, authority used old methods, which are not effective now in a dynamically developing world, just like Telegram. Because right now, authorities cannot block any single channel of Telegram. They try to do everything they could, but it's not effective. It gives no result. They only try to make the anonymization of the users. They say it's dangerous. All that you write there, according to them, can be easily found in the internet and published. But no matter this situation, user is a addressing person of an information, which omits the editing factor without it's directly forming a social opinion, and it's our goal, because right now every person that sends information becomes in a sort a journalist, so it underlines the social role of the project. So it looks like this right now.
That sounds great. Tell us a little bit more. So you mentioned that there is, everyone can become a citizen journalism. And I think we journalists rely a lot on eyewitnesses, on what people are sending us to our newsrooms, but also to you, right, as to your project. So how do you see how do you motivate people? Why do people trust you in the first place? Why do they send you these videos?
Przede wszystkim mamy zaufanie
First
dlatego.
of all, we have this trust because we are in Poland, and people do understand that if we were in Belarus, we might be arrested, and the list of readers and people who contact us would be easily visible to people to authorities in Belarus. At this moment, it is anonymous for us and for them. They understand that we are regular people who process the information, who make content out of it. The content that can be mass published. That is why they send it to us. We are the biggest channel, Russian language channel, regarding Belarus. So people can see that. People see true, honest information, and that contributes. And they want to contribute to that. They want to publish their own stuff there.
I think I will come back to this, this largest channel, as you mentioned. I will ask you about actually the history of your channel, but a bit later. Let me come back to Andrzej. So you mentioned some of these latest developments in the past weeks in Grodno, right? But I'd like to ask you about this kind of longer history, right, about what happened before and why protests were not successful before. What has changed? Like, we have 26 years of power of Alexander Lukashenko, and people were protesting in 2010, in 2017, and those protests were not so long. So what do you think changed, and why? These would be two questions. What do you think changed, and why these protests were not successful before?
Well, first of all, there was no such support. People were not convinced of the stagnation of the regime, that the people couldn't see any more future with Lukashenko. People now are sure Lukashenko will not solve any problems, will not improve the economic situation. How long can Lukashenko governance last? It's been enough. And it seems to me that the internet has become stronger than the TV. Before that, Lukashenko has better economic resources. He could pump money into the society like it happened in 1990 when he offered increases in income for selected groups. And that supported his voters. The issue of the internet is very important. The growth, development of technologies is a fact, and that tendency is reflected in Belarus. It has always had special situation with the media. The public media always was dominated by the government propaganda, and they managed to persuade a remarkable part of the society. Now, all of a sudden, the internet is becoming more and more popular. Internet in the broad understanding, the messenger. Well, the internet has become stronger than the TV, and that, in my opinion, impacted that the social issues, the ability to discuss things. At one moment, people noticed earlier, everybody believed that the majority was for Lukashenko. I was against, my family was against, but the majority was for. But now people could see that the situation is the other way around, that the majority is against him. And that is the reason why the protests keep going on. People are sure that Lukashenko lost the election. He can't win the election. And that also is the driving force for the protest. Then all these dramatic events, this brutality of the militia, at one moment, the traditional repression was abandoned. New practices were introduced, like we have this department to fighting organized crime. They have always been very brutal, and whoever got there, people knew they could beat you, they could torture you. And now that department was sent to the street, and all the nation could see what the operational means were. So all that had an influence on the ongoing protest, on the fact that the society will not agree with Lukashenko at power.
I'm not sure about this translation about Gubopik, but this is kind of department, anti-corruption, anti-terrorist department of the Interior Ministry, just for the audience's understanding. And they've been roaming around the city basically without any identification.
Against organized crime and corruption, that the main authority to counteract organized crime and corruption. That's the translation.
Exactly. So now I'm confident that there is translation. But basically, yeah, the thing is that they've been kind of roaming around the city, around Minsk mostly, without any identification signs, and just, you know, beating people on the streets and detaining people and basically even crashing cars. In the only moment, the only case when a glass door was ruined, was crushed, was when actually this head of this Gubopik, of this department of the Interior Ministry, Nikolai Karpenko, when he crushed this glass door of a cafe himself. Otherwise, protesters are obviously peaceful and they don't kind of, you know, ruin the city and ruin city's property. Yeah, so that's all clear. Andrew, would you like to answer the question, why do you think the protests previously, you mentioned that the internet kind of became more popular, and well, but it's been a few years, you know, since the internet became popular, and that people kind of all of a sudden understood that they are the majority, not the minority. But why do you think before, well, let's say 9 years ago, when there was this revolution through social media, революция про социальные сетки, and while the internet was quite popular back then as well, and you know, all these rallies, all these protests were organized via Kontakte, and these were not so massive rallies 9 years ago, despite the fact that these kind of self-organization, this wave of protest took place after the 2010 presidential election, which were obviously rigged. So what's the difference?
Well, during these elections, people could see they are the majority. Previously, they didn't believe they were the majority. Nobody was convinced that there is more people against Lukashenko than for. Indeed, from the very moment when the election was announced, when the collection of signatures started, Tikhanovsky started that. I remember people gathering in Grodno, and it didn't look like having a potential for the future. And all of a sudden, we could see that he made a movement, and it all started. It sometimes happens so with authoritarian regimes, that something sparks and things collapse. So when signatures started to be collected, when there were people queuing to sign, when all that started to be reported on the internet, on all the social media, what Stepan was saying, that everybody was a journalist and everybody took a picture standing in the line, and it became a trend. And we saw who's for Lukashenko, and everybody was standing to sign against him. In my opinion, a number of things happened together. And first time, Lukashenko didn't have money before the election. It was the first time he did not pump money into the public. So he being convinced that the economy was going in a very bad direction, which has been true for many years, but there was always this conviction that he will get out of it somehow. Still, many people believe that the government will make it somehow. So 26 years of his rule, his manipulating and turning things upside down, it's all contributed that those who voted against him were inactive before.
Yeah, well, speaking of manipulations and speaking of all these, tricks that Lukashenko is deploying, most recently he went to the KGB prison to talk to political prisoners about potential reforms of the constitution, and many people saw it as a sign of weakness, both those who oppose Lukashenko, but also people who are on the same side with him. He most recently said that there is this constructive opposition that is ready for dialogue, and that the national kind of dialogue is sort of happening. But it will be a question to Volga. There is the Coordination Council. This body was created by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya to help organize, hold national dialogue and demand a new and fair election from Alexander Lukashenko. I would like to ask you, Volga, a little bit more about the Coordination Council. Could you say what's happening now? How do you see the next step of it? And could you kind of explain us what is that?
Coordination Council is a unified representative body of the Belarusian people. It has been created on the initiative of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya to organize the process of overcoming the political crisis and ensure social cohesion, as well as protect the sovereignty and independence of the Republic of Belarus. It is a representative body of the Belarusian people and an association of people from all social groups, experts, students, workers, doctors, teachers, so on. The council has two main tasks. The first one is to put pressure of the authorities through international solidarity and pressure, including sanctions, internal pressure by the citizens, including meetings, strikes, economic pressure on enterprises and businesses, and so on. The second one is to provide the people on the ground with the tools for self-organizations in the legal field to protect themselves and their interests. If the state does not respect the law and does not function, the citizens have to take the responsibility and create new independent structures. Thousands of Belarusians were and are in prison, including Coordination Council members. At least 8 persons were killed or found dead. The regime wants to make a picture of a dialogue, but the Coordination Council had put clear conditions for a dialogue to start: freedom for all political prisoners, and of violence in new presidential elections.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's sort of more clear, I think, at the moment. Stepan, as promised, I'd like to come back to you and ask you about how do you, if you could tell us a little bit more about your channel, how it started. I remember it was already popular a few years ago when there was another wave of protest in 2017, I guess. And there was this criminal case that was launched against you back then. It was a defamation case, as far as I remember. Yeah, if you could tell us kind of how it was YouTube first, right? And now it's Telegram. So how were you able to create this, social media empire on your own?
Sukcesowi popularności tych
Well, the popularity of these channels are due to regime of Lukashenko, because mostly it was due to errors that this authority made. It was a hidden advertisement of this channel. Recognizing this channel as extremist channel only increased its popularity amongst Belarusian people. And I think that every user of the internet in Belarus knows about this channel now, sends the information, some interesting things. And before, of course, yes, there were some files against me. There were attempts to criminalize my activities. Later on, there were attempts to block my channel on the YouTube for copyrights, which was, of course, only the right to use state materials, quotations, because we did not have any other independent sources, open sources. That's why they tried to block it on this basis, but they were not successful. Also, there were a wave of articles in the internet and a lot of other similar steps they made. Any footage of Lukashenko were considered to be extremists, and similar attempts. Right now they are not effective, of course, because people understand that tens of thousands of people that share this content have no tools, that authorities have no tools to criminalize these people for their activities. Also, the number of people that is sharing information, sends this information to us, use internet and do not watch television, it's still a small percent. I mean, right now, only small percent of people still watch TV and believes Lukashenko. That's why this channel was and remains so popular due to these authorities. At first, it was a YouTube channel. From 2017, I posted one news report on what happens in the Belarusia. Later on, this channel there were attempts to block this channel with the information, most popular one.
I think, well, thank you for this. I think it will be great to know kind of more details. Do you have a network of correspondents on the ground who is helping you? I'm quite sure that you cannot do this alone. I mean, I'm not obviously asking about names and you know, passwords, nothing like that. But yeah, if you could kind of explain it a little bit more, the infrastructure behind the channel.
Nie, oczywiście, że nie mamy żadnych.
Of course, we do not have any journalists that exclusively send their information to us, because it's very dangerous for them, and authorities react very sharply on this channel. And we have a lot of people that suffered because of these activities. Any people that have anything in common with Poland, who just went from Poland to Belarusia because of propaganda of this of militia, of forcers, is on the discourse that Poland is behind this, is orchestrating these protests. They blame Poland for orchestrating these protests. Miechta is most popular channel. They say, go to Niechta, and their reaction is very sharp. That's why we do not have any people on Belarus, because it's very dangerous for them. We would not be responsible people to keep our journalists there. Moreover, whole team of Niechta is in Poland already safe. Earlier, there were a couple of people were on Belarusia, but currently even those people had to be taken to Poland because it was dangerous to them.
Thank you for this. Hopefully, you know, they will be safe, your colleagues. Andrzej, let me come back to you. So you mentioned that basically, you know, the people kind of all of a sudden understood that they are the majority, right? And I do agree, I do support this, and it's really hard to say, to kind of name a single social group that supports Lukashenko at the moment. However, who is he relying on? These are obviously his security forces, but could you explain a little bit more, like, why is he strong? Why is his system being so well maintained and strong?
Znaczy, no, po pierwsze, on jednak, no,
Well, first of all, yeah, I do not have any social data right now, but he have such social support, but it's a minority right now, as I've said before. But it's not this support of the minority was decisive factor, but the loyalty of state apparatus, because he managed to keep it. Because the biggest transfer was Paweł Latuszka to open opposition. It was a person that was, however, not on a very significant post. He used to be a higher elite. But right now, this transfer was not, his position was not that significant, which also shows how this system is closed. That's why looking at the protest, we understand that apparatus is so well established. Another thing is force resources and their willingness to fulfill any order of Alexander Lukashenko. I think it was a very dangerous situation when Lukashenko made a step back and then another step to make the situation harsh. He gave an order to be more aggressive, but then again to be more mild to demonstrants. And third pillar is, of course, the support of Russia. It's generally the most interesting phenomena because the West tried to save Lukashenko from Russia. It was most important during the last years of policy of European Union, of Poland, and suddenly this crisis showed that there is no such deep conflict between Russia and Lukashenko. And what we witnessed, some economical conflicts were internal, inside family conflicts. So if not for the support of the Russia, I think in 15, 16 or 27 or 17th of August, we would have some separation. Then if the apparatus was transferred to opposition, the situation would solve very rapidly. But it happened other way around. This message from Vladimir Putin, his support, showing off his reserves. It's not only showing for Belarusian society, but also to show elites of Belarusian apparatus, to show that Lukashenko has a political future because he is supported by Russia. That's why, from the perspective of the West, from Poland perspective, it's another time that we see that how political Polish policy changes during 24 hours cardinally, from friendship and love, warming up and liberalization, to consequent winter. And what happens now is unprecedented in Belarus. I mean, all the military actions, military units, when Poland and Lithuania were considered to be a threat, a military threat. I hope that there will be some conclusions. You can't make friends with a crocodile.
Oh yeah, especially when we are talking about protests and killings, right, of peaceful protesters, of ordinary citizens. So yeah, hopefully, you know, this kind of new tactics, new strategy would be deployed, and we, I think, already see that a lot has changed, you know, since the election, and how the West is perceiving Belarus, and basically now, well, majority of, I guess, democratic countries, including the EU, the US, the UK, and some other countries such as Japan, did not recognize the election in Belarus and did not recognize Lukashenko as the legitimate ruler. So, so there is definitely a major shift in how the world perceives this situation. I'd like to come back to Volha. However, as I understand, we will need to have an interpreter on her side, and yeah, it's totally fine if she can join. That would be great. So so Volha, I'd like to ask you about yeah, about what's next, about basically the projects that the Coordination Council is doing, and in the position in general, right? What do you see as the representative of the Belarusian opposition as your next step? And now we can use the translation. Hopefully that will work. work out.
Я тогда сниму наушники, потому что нужно будет перевести. Ольга переведет на английский.
Да, я рядом.
Да.
Hello.
На самом деле, конечно, сейчас ситуация в Беларуси происходит трансформация политического поля.
At the moment, we are witnessing a transformation of political field in Belarus.
И важно, чтобы новые политические силы, которые в этом году появились на политическом поле Беларуси, они в этой политической трансформации присутствовали.
And it's important that the new political forces which came to the arena in Belarus this year participated in the formation of the political field now.
И важной опорой этих сил являются в первую очередь белорусы и люди, которые находятся сейчас внутри страны и продолжают борьбу.
And of course, the people who are in Belarus at the moment are important because they are forming those new groups of influence.
В ситуации политического кризиса, когда власть фактически не представляет белорусов, важно, чтобы сейчас белорусы объединялись в низовые инициативы.
At the time of the political crisis, when the authorities do not represent the citizens anymore, it's important that the citizens themselves would unite into the groups which would represent their interests.
Это административно-территориальное объединение в рамках легального поля, которое доступно сегодня в Беларуси. Это КАТОСы, местное собрание, местные инициативы.
So the initiatives which are legal are those which belong to the sphere of uniting the citizens on the basis of their territorial, where they are living, the units where they are living, then the regional unions. These are the legal opportunities for Belarusians.
В этих инициативах обязательно есть уже лидеры, которые берут на себя ответственность, и эти лидеры представляют мнение этого не структурированного, но объединения людей и солидарных вот на местах.
Those groups have their leaders, and so those leaders are already can speak on behalf of these new not structures, but already groups of people.
И эти лидеры и эти сообщества транслируют совсем другую повестку, не такую, как транслирует ее Александр Лукашенко. И вот как раз сила и опора новых лидеров и нового демократического движения именно противостоять той повестке, которую навязывает Александр Лукашенко. А это можно сделать только через вот эти низовые инициативы объединения и этих лидеров.
So those new grassroots initiatives and the leaders of those initiatives, they speak of the issues which are opposite to what Lukashenko speaks, and they represent the agenda of the people at the moment.
И важно также еще один аспект – это выход из всех провластных организаций, в которых состоят люди, которые продолжают финансировать режим. Это касается профсоюзов и НЖО провластных, Союз женщин, то есть все организации, которые сегодня не представляют людей, но они являются фикцией для трансляции месседжа или позиции какой-то части населения.
And then the other important factor is that the people should leave all pro-governmental organizations such as trade unions, because those NGOs, because those organizations are used to impose his agenda.
И, конечно же, это обращение в государственные органы и давление на государственные органы на низовом уровне, чтобы они видели и знали мнение людей, не только на уровне министерства и президента, но и на уровне маленьких сельсоветов и других организаций, которые в маленьких городах работают.
And the people, in using those new initiatives, should put pressure on the local governments, because they should know the people on the ground have their voice, and they are able to speak on behalf of themselves.
В Координационном совете есть несколько проектов, которые направлены как раз вот на те три вещи, о которых я сейчас сказала.
And the Coordination Council has several projects which support those initiatives which I mentioned at them now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Excellent. I think we might actually come back to and kind of explore it further. This project you mentioned, but let me ask Stepan, because Volkan mentioned just a moment ago that the opposition, the Coordination Council, and obviously Svetlana Tikhanovskaya are relying on the people on the ground, and that's the major force. These is kind of, these are people who are obviously at the front line of the protest, and that's what also the world has been observing. Without those people on the streets, perhaps there would not be so much attention paid to the situation in Belarus. So, Stepan, let me ask you this. How do you make sure, how do you coordinate with other Telegram channels, messages that you are sending? Is there any sort of coordination? Is there, how do you agree on these messages? It's a lot of responsibility, I imagine, to kind of ask people to come out to the streets, when they are being beaten and harassed, arrested all the time. So how do you make sure that they are safe? Do you think about that at all? And is there any sort of coordination between other Telegram channels?
Oczywiście staramy się
We
standaryzować.
are trying to standardize our messages so that we do not look that everybody broadcasts their own messages, invented messages, but the messages are coherent and standardized, which means all the biggest channels in the Telegram will never argue and have never argued about the time and place of action. We work in relation with the Coordination Council Tikhanovskaya, people who are there on the site in Belarus, and we are trying to select best solutions that are proper for the given moment. That is why, answering your question, yes, we all act together and everybody discusses the actions and further steps.
Do you think, well, because there are basically two major channels, Telegram channels that are currently popular, your channel and Belarus of the brain, right? Do you feel that this monopoly, this information monopoly is, do you think it's dangerous? Do you think it makes sense? It's okay for you? Do you think it should be changed? What are the dangers of such monopoly, information monopoly?
Nie powiedziałbym, że to jest
I wouldn't say it's a monopoly. There are propaganda channels that are currently with many subscribers, of course, about 100,000 subscribers. I believe half of that are fake users, but the authorities are trying to get to these media, and I would say it is monopolized, but as a result, in the future, it can influence the objectivity of providing information. But in the future, we will not have something like Bielsat. When you phone officials, they would think we are traitors, we are from another country, we are under foreign control. They will not give us information. That's why that may be far from being objective. But as we can see, so far, everybody in Belarus is unified. We have one common goal, that is abolish the Lukashenko regime, and secondly, to run new fair election, and thirdly, to stop the militia violence and trace it in every case. So I think it's too early to speak about monopoly and objectivism.
Okay, thank you. Andrzej, I was wondering, well, Stepan just mentioned that, you know, people are united and they are united against police brutality. They want a new fair election. Do you think, do you see any chance that Alexander Lukashenko would agree on that? Under what conditions? I think, well, it's an obvious question. It's a very difficult question, but I think a lot of people, the whole world is basically wondering, you know, under what condition that might happen.
This is a situation. Alexander Lukashenko looks like a man addicted to power. I cannot see myself, I cannot see him ready to quit, apart from the scenario when he is abolished. If he is abolished, then he will need to quit. But I cannot see any readiness on his part to share the power, not even with the opposition or political opponents within his own circle. The Russia's proposal was to extend their own base, to formalize its contacts, and to have such an effect that Lukashenko's collapse, as they see he will have no future in democracy, Lukashenko will have no future. And Russia sees that and encourages him to reforms, to share the power with some pro-Russia party, to make some kind of rebranding with one person. It would be quite easy if Lukashenko said to arrest some people who were very brutal. He would become very popular. The point is, there are many good words about people's awareness, but this awareness is not that strong. The problem is that the regime does not want to play it in an intelligent manner. They use the hammer, the stick, but if you leave Lukashenko, they have a range of means to keep the system of power and to keep the system as it is with the new face. But they are not doing that because they support Lukashenko and he is maniacally sticking to the power. I don't think something else that he does would change it. It's quite dramatic, but this is a dramatic solution.
Up, and I don't want to finish, you know, on such a kind of sad and pessimistic note. I'd say that, well, you know, it's been more than 3 months basically since the start of the protest, and a lot has changed, and people really showed their defiance and resistance. And I think that they gave a lot of hope to themselves, but also to the whole world that, you know, this change is possible. I'd like to thank my distinguished speakers, great panelists. It was a great pleasure to talk to you. volunteer, Volga Kovalkova from the Belarusian Coordination Council, Andrzej Poczobot, prominent journalist, columnist at Gazeta Wyborcza, and Stepan Kutila, founder of this Telegram channel, Nechta, prominent blogger and really famous person in Belarus. So thank you very much, and have a great evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Hanna.
Dziękujemy, do widzenia.